Welcome to a brand new deal, the thriving evolution of sponsored content. I'm Dan Goodman. I'll be the moderator. I'm the co-founder of Believe Entertainment Group. I want to welcome everybody here. We have a great panel. Ryan Daume from Studio 71, who's the VP of Sales and Branded Entertainment. Max Pulsar stepping in, who is the Chief Revenue Officer at AwesomenessTV. And Drea Bernardi, the Director of Video Programming at AOL Partner Studios. We'll get into what everybody's doing in just a moment. I will quickly just introduce myself. I'm the co-founder of Believe Entertainment Group. We are an entertainment company that focuses primarily on digital distribution for content, although we do other things as well. We work with A-list talent like LeBron James, which we're starting our 4th season of an animated show we do called The LeBrons that's lived on Xbox and YouTube. A show we do with Tiesto called In the Booth, which has been on YouTube for 3 seasons and now is going to Fuse and their sister network FM for the 4th season, which is kind of interesting. And recently, last week, we just announced a deal with Kobe Bryant and Sports Illustrated that we're doing that we announced at the time Newfronts, which is pretty exciting. So in all cases, we're always working with brands, and we're bringing brands in and creating a lot of really interesting opportunities for integrations and custom content, and we're going to talk more about that today. I thought I would quickly just set up the topic here for a minute, and then we'll do quick intros, and everybody can kind of talk a little bit about their companies so you have some context for what everybody's doing and the position they're coming from. The IAB's actually put forth a couple of interesting stats in the last week or two, being the Newfronts, some interesting things that I thought I'd start with. One is they reported that video spend on original digital content has increased 114% since 2014. And I thought that was kind of interesting because they're citing a lot of it from the Newfronts and the fact that there's a lot of activity in a lot of companies like the ones that are represented up here, taking great pains and great efforts to make sure that advertisers, audiences, and others in the industry really know about what's going on. And conversely, I guess not a big surprise, they also reported that original digital video audience grew to 63 million across all of the audiences from about 45 million in 2013. So it's a pretty decent jump in audience viewership and about a 9% increase in median household income year over year of viewers. And I thought that was kind of interesting because even still with brands, we hear a lot of people talking about, oh, well, I'm not going after millennials, or we're not going after college kids, so digital and digital video may or may not be the right place for us. But one of the interesting things that the IAB kind of talked about was the fact that the audience, obviously the size is growing, but as that grows, so does that bell curve of the audience makeup, the demographics, the age group and stuff. Digital video still remains one of the fastest growing categories in all of advertising. It's growing something like 45% compound year over year. It's expected to be about $13 billion or something along those lines of ad spend in the next 3 years. And kind of at the heart of it all, and really what we're here to talk about today is branded entertainment that's driving it through sponsorships, driving it through media integrations and otherwise. And we've got some awesome panelists to talk a little bit about their experiences and how they see this stuff growing. But clearly it's here to stay, and it's a big mainstay of what just advertising is now. So the question is, how is it working? Where does it work best? Why does it work best? What lessons are we getting? And what does branded entertainment really mean? So before we get into all of these questions and some of the answers to it, I thought we'd quickly go and make some introductions. If you guys could just give us a little bit about your businesses and how you guys are approaching brands at it as well, that'd be awesome. Max, why don't we kick it off with you?
Sure. Hi, guys. I'm Max Pulsar. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer of AwesomenessTV. We are a next-generation media company. We make a tremendous amount of content, and we distribute that content across the distributed landscape. So within our facility, we're making products, movies, long-form series that are going out to SVOD. We program a YouTube channel, Snapchat, all the social handles. We also have an MCN where we have 90,000 creators. We have a talent management company where we're representing artists that were born off of the internet. And in a lot of that content, we help brands navigate sort of the social online video experience, either through the brand of AwesomenessTV, which is sort of a Sherpa across all the social platforms that exist, and as well as through influencer marketing, where we represent some of the top, more established creators, and we're constantly developing and putting up-and-comers from the various platforms into our content. We've made movies that have #1 releases on iTunes, in the players like YouTube Red, and most recently we announced a Freakish, which was a long-form series with Hulu. And so naturally, advertising surrounds all of that, but we don't distinguish between content we make for our own products or our own brand from those that we make with advertisers. So we don't have a secret sauce factory that makes branded content versus regular content. We're making a lot of content. And I would say with the market and the size of our company, certainly all the numbers you spouted off, we're experiencing.
I did spout. I felt good about that, yeah.
We're certainly experiencing a lot of that growth and having new partners come in and help us expand that rapidly.
Awesome. Let's get crazy. Ryan, we're going to go out of order.
All right. Ryan Daume, VP of Brand and Sales in New York. Studio 71, somewhat similar to Awesomeness in many ways. We have a little bit less of the forward-facing brand that Awesomeness does, that plays Sherpa, as he mentioned, but sit with some of the biggest influencers and creators across many different new digital outlets, mediums for content, and help them do bigger and better things. Our job is to help them create that new piece of content for their channel, a movie release, a book release, what have you, and help them find a way to do it, whether that means by partnering with a brand, by deficit financing that, by creating collaborations between our creators. If we can help them level up their content and bring newer, cooler, better things to their audiences, whomever was involved should be seen in a better light by that audience.
Just real quick, if you're not familiar with the Studio 71 name.
Yes, we at Studio 71, formerly known as Collective Digital Studio. We partnered with ProSieben Sat1 late last year, which is one of the bigger broadcasters out of Europe, and are now Studio 71. Sieben translates to 7, Sat1. So a little explanation for the name.
Awesome. And we saved the best for last.
Aww.
Drea.
Hi, I'm Drea Bernardi. I'm the Director of Video Programming for the AOL Partner Studios, a little company that's first generation, next generation, all of the above. We are the secret sauce factory that Max talked about for all of the AOL brands, Huffington Post, AOL.com. We're partnering with brands like Style Me Pretty and Maker.com to reach our advertisers and create custom content for our AOL's largest advertisers. So they come to AOL and they want custom content. The AOL Partner Studios handles all of the custom content and strategy for those advertisers. So yeah.
You caught me making notes of the things you were saying because I didn't think you were
I know, I was really short.
I know, of all the
But I
people to
didn't
be
feel like
short
I
on
need
the
as
word
much
in the middle.
explanation as these two gentlemen.
I thought that was wonderful.
Thanks.
What I'd like to do is start with the term branded entertainment because it's such a big, buzzy word that means so many different things to so many different people. And I'd like to dispel that in general and try to break that down. And while we're at it, one of the things I thought we could do as we're talking is to try to avoid some of the overused sales pitch words and big things like we're doing big things or lots of content or like help us understand what branded entertainment. You're working with brands, Max, every single day. You're the chief revenue officer. It's your job to be in front of them and seeing it. How do you define brand entertainment to them? What does that mean when you're there talking to them and trying to help them understand how to be part of it?
I mean, it depends on the objective of the brand, but generally, branded entertainment as we see it. Again, we don't distinguish the things that we make because we're making 21 shows, putting them just on our YouTube channel, right? So if you're looking at social video, anything that goes on Awesomeness has to look, feel, and have our own brand fingerprint on it. And so when we engage with brands, it's about making something where the brand becomes value to the story, becomes a character. our #1 show on Awesomeness that gets millions of organic views on its own is actually branded entertainment. It's called Royal Crush. It's a Romeo Juliet scripted series that ultimately is the biggest branded product placement because it all happens on a Royal Caribbean boat. But it's about a love story and travel and teens actually experiencing different things without a call to action. You know, there's no like Jim Cramer bye 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 in it. If you know, we stop making that, the fans of Awesomeness would actually be upset. They call the company and they ask when the next seasons are happening, right? We're actually filming our 3rd season. And so when you watch that show, you know, there's sweeping shots of the sea and the, you know, the ports of call, and naturally, you know, they're by the pool and what have you. But the story unfolds no different than it would on a television show. And so it's sort of a frictionless experience to understand that, you know, the show and these characters that you've come to know and want things from happen to be doing things on, quote, you know, the ship. I think, you know, that's in its best form because the results and the performance of that, you know, lend itself to that. You've got branded entertainment or branded content where, you know, brands come in to help deficit finance a project of an artist. So that is sort of like high-end production. We send a crew. It takes a while to film, cast, and edit that. On the easier to entry branded entertainment, you've got, you know, personalities that are making shows that their livelihood is to bring things to their fans. So they can do that, you know, from the simplicity of their home, or some of them do their own travel shows, and brands can go along for the ride or help present that in a more upfront fashion that like, hey, this is entertainment, but it's branded in the fact that, you know, this favorite vlogger or favorite new musician couldn't have made this piece of art without the brand's help. And so the brand then becomes an enabler as opposed to a character. And between those two, you know, there's lots in the middle of the spectrum, but you either need to come right out and say, we're enabling this as a brand, and then get out of the way and let the content happen, or you need to be involved in a frictionless way as the brand and be, you know, deeply involved or deeply rooted in the storyline, but not interrupting it.
I have a question about that. So before we move on, are you having these conversations with all of your brands? Like, is it sustainable in volume to do something like Royal Crush? So when you define brand entertainment and you go out and talk to brands, do you always start with like, hey, this is what we would love you to be doing, but if they can't do it, either budget, resource, or whatever, you move them down the funnel? Like, how do you sustain that in volume? Because you guys obviously do a big business, more than just one-off shows. Not everybody can do like an entire series on their own, right? So
Sure.
What's the volume play in that? Like, how do you define it as brands go down the funnel, if you will?
You know, top tier or top performing shows on any platform are not scalable, right? If they were, then, you know, there'd be a lot more hit shows. There's a lot of great television on TV. There's a lot of great content on the internet. We only have so many windows that we can actually make series for and distribute them, because we program our online video social channels no differently than you would have programmed any media program or TV or radio station. There has to be some context, there has to be some symmetry, and there has to be expectations. So by virtue of limited inventory, not every brand experience can be Royal Crush. Yes, we would love to be making more Royal Crushes. You know, we're announcing some things later this week or tonight, you know, on some other fronts. But we also make a tremendous amount of content. So, you know, a series doesn't have to be scripted and traveling around the world. A series can also happen in our studio, where, you know, we've got live shows happening, Top 5 Live on Verizon Go 90, as well as like shows like DIY, DI Don't, or My Quinceañera, like.
Oh, that was good.
Yeah, there's from Miami.
Yeah. No,
originally. And so we can integrate brands, and we do, into the programming that we're already making, or take versions of things that we were making and help package those to drive what their goals are. And so not everything, of course, is going to be scripted. There's a lot of non-scripted. There's also experiential But yes, in a perfect world, everyone would be doing Royal Crush size programs. But we just, while we can scale the bandwidth, the top shows, like anything, there's only a few of them out there. So we really have to get deep into the strategy with what they're trying to accomplish. And in the case of cruises, parents that wanted to bring their young children could get them to go. Parents that had teens needed a vehicle to help explain that cruising was cool. And this show became a valuable asset in inspiring teens to want to actually go and experience the things that they saw their favorite influencers or fans of cast of characters to go and do. And so it became something that was innate in them, where they would raise their hands and say, hey, let's go.
So the message for brands watching this later, streaming on the site, aspire for Royal Crush, build your strategy,
Hey, I like it.
Make it happen, right? Drea, your whole group is all about branded content. So
Yeah.
how do you guys define brand entertainment?
Well, I thought it was really interesting what you were talking about, Max, because you were talking about this top tier experience. And we really are looking at custom content based on what the advertiser is looking to achieve, what their goals are, but then also trying to figure out what levels of integrations they need, how custom, looking at our different publishing platforms and looking at the distribution models and how we're going to build an audience and talk about how the audience is going to engage with that content. And so in the partner studio, when we're looking at video, we're looking at original series, which have our premium content experiences that are built to sold, where a brand comes in, they have a seat at the table creatively, but these are really editorially driven shows, meaning that all of the content creation is coming from edit. So for the Huffington Post, for example, we had a really successful series in Q1 of this year called Next Level Living. It was an initiative that Huffington Post was standing behind with their full force. They wanted to see this show get made, and we needed an advertiser partner to make sure that the show could be made in the way that we wanted to tell that story. And so we brought on Sleep Number as our partner, and we were able to develop a show that had Sleep Number, again, facilitating this great conversation. It was thematically aligned with the themes that they wanted to align with on the Huffington Post. And then we're able to blow that out with media across all of the AOL properties. So you have this landing page and this home of this original custom content, and then we're taking this multi-pronged approach to distribution, to advertising, to bringing all the ads together on the page and making sure that it's this really rich experience for the advertiser, so that it's not just about the content, but it's all of these other things in addition to the content. And we're finding that the brands that we work with really like that experience, that if it was just the content, they're feeling a little like, oh, I'm not so sure about the return on investment. That's a lot of money that you're asking for. And then moving down the funnel, we have different
I'm sorry, but you're saying, just to be clear, but you're saying when you add in the distribution around that, it makes them feel more comfortable. So it's the content plus the distribution that you're delivering.
It's content plus distribution, but it's also content, for example, on the Huffington Post, when we're distributing the content, you're seeing all of that advertising. It's 100% share of voice by Sleep Number, 100% share of voice for pre-roll behind the content. So it really is a rich advertising experience around the content. So the content is staying very true to the editorial insights and the editorial nature of the Huffington Post, meaning the advertiser isn't influencing it in any way, other than saying we want to align thematically with this content. And we do allow 3 out of the 10 episodes are about sleep, which is our major initiative on the Huffington Post, and obviously important to Sleep Number. But the rest of the episodes are about meditation and eating well and all of these other kinds of topics that really resonate with our audience. Yep. And they're being brought to you by Sleep Number. And so it's not, there's no beds, for example, that you're talking about.
Right.
We're not highlighting.
Did we mention the whole thing takes place in the bed?
It's all in a bed. We're all in a bed.
Yeah, it's awkward at first to watch the episodes, but then you really get into it.
It's
good.
So, but then we do what's called native video on the Huffington Post, and native video is where, so we're going to interview some couples, and guess what? They're going to be in a Sleep Number bed. So it's an interview show, and we're trying to figure out how can we integrate the product in the most authentic way to our audience so that no one's getting grossed out by the experience, right? We really want to make sure that we're bringing them something that they love and want to share. And we aren't offending anyone by some overt advertising. And then the last piece that we create on the video side is straight up what we call branded entertainment. And this is content that's a little bit more advertorial in nature. It's really, instead of being authentic to the voice of the publisher, it's authentic to the voice of the brand. And that's when we figure out different ways of distribution other than an organic distribution on the publisher, right? So for example, that brand might sponsor health and wellness content, and then we distribute it through rich ad units that are happening on the page. We'll distribute it through our network. We'll let them post it on their YouTube channel, right? And it really is using our expertise and insights from, being such a great online publication that really understands the space, and using those insights to develop content on behalf of our brand partners.
Awesome. And Ryan, how are you guys thinking about it?
Well, Max mentioned something at the start that I think I'm going to rip from you, which is we don't distinguish between branded content and unbranded content. We try to make good content that's going to resonate with the audience it was meant for. If you walk away from watching that piece of content and feel like, wow, that was branded, then we probably haven't done our job well. We can't hide it. We don't want to hide the fact that a brand was involved. But if you walk away thinking, that was really neat that Walmart did that, or that was a great project and that brand being involved made the experience better for me, then that's what we're striving for each time. Branded content for us is almost every piece of content that we try and create. It's got the brand of our creators behind it, and if we can couple that brand with the brand in question who's here to help level it up, and help that brand ride on the coattails of Logan Paul or of Rhett and Link and whomever the creator may be, then we've kind of done our job well, I'd like to think.
So let me ask you something. I mean, that's a super lofty goal to say all content is just good content, but when the brand comes to you and they're spending the money and you wouldn't be doing this content otherwise, for example, and they want to change it up or they want to have influence over a storyline or they want to approve wardrobe or something, I mean, how do you balance those things out? Like, what do those conversations look like? Where do you think the brand's role is in that when you're developing it for them?
It varies. Again, there's a huge spectrum of how much say you can have, and some of that is how much are you leveling up what we're doing here and creating. But if Coors Light doesn't get to dictate what the other 28 minutes of SportsCenter are between the cold hard facts, for them to come in and say that you have to change up some other aspect of the episode or the show is really out of place. And the same can be said for a creator environment and the environment that we spend most of our day in. Our creators have built this audience, this loyal fan base behind them because they know what that group wants to see. And they've gotten better and better at it over time. And a brand has come because they want to engage that audience. They want to lift and take value from it. If you come in and you degrade that content by way of trying to slap brands on foreheads and do different things that aren't really going to increase the level of the experience, then you're kind of burning money. But if you can come in and collaborate well and everybody kind of figures out what their role is and how to make the entire experience better for the audience, then it's usually a pretty fruitful experience for everyone involved.
So are you starting every time with your slate of creators, their programming, and then offering it to brands? Or are you ever looking at a scenario where a brand comes to you and says, can you create something purely from scratch? How do you guys look at that brand landscape?
I think it varies completely. There are situations where there's a piece of existing content that marries up really well. Mm-hmm. And then there's other cases where we launched a week ago a new project with Hawaiian Tropic and Shay Mitchell. Shay Mitchell we partnered with over a year ago now to help her build out her YouTube presence. And she didn't necessarily have a bunch of existing formats, but she has a bunch of things she's into.
And you were already working there? That was already a pre-existing relationship?
Yes, we were already working with Shay. We knew there was certainly some synergies between her and the brand, but looking for how do we do something that audience would want, that fits her ethos and can answer the bell for the brand. And we created a series called Shaycation, Shay lives a pretty great lifestyle. She travels around the world quite a bit. She's one of the Pretty Little Liars, if you're not familiar, huge social influencer across all the different platforms. But Shaycation really speaks to the ethos of the brand. Sunscreen marries very well up with vacation, sending her to some luxurious environments. Fit for her and was something she was really excited about. It was a new piece of content. It was born out of that. But were Hawaiian Tropic to walk away, we would still do that piece of content because it's great and our audience loves it.
Right. And it's still that talent relationship that you had regardless of the brand.
Right.
So Drea, slightly different mix of stuff for you, right? I mean, it probably runs the gamut. And when we spoke, you said something interesting. You mentioned it just now before too, but if you could elaborate, because I think it's relevant. This idea of native versus commercial, I might not be getting that totally right, but you said you were talking about content that's native content to the editorial and content that's more commercially driven or more brand, starts with a brand brief versus an editorial brief. You run the gamut, right?
Yeah, and I'd like to add on that AOL, some of you may have been at our awesome New Friends last week, but we also have straight up editorial original video content that we're creating where a brand can come in and be integrated into that if they are a part of the process, more of a just straight up brand integration. And then we also just straight up sell sponsorships on that content. So we're really like doing the whole spectrum of things that we're talking about here. I have some really interesting questions for these guys about the age of their audience too, because I think that that's really important to the level of branded integration that they're okay with. But I will answer your question about...
And then ask their question.
Yeah,
and then
we can
you
talk
ask your
about
question.
how old
Finish
everyone
that
is.
and then
but,
ask.
For us, it's, again, I think I mentioned native to the editorial voice, which I'm hearing you say is this concept is native to our creator. Right? This is something that our creator would be doing anyways. We would want to do this. This is something that our audience expects and wants to see. And then we integrate that brand in a way that is super authentic, right? And I saw the sizzle for the Hawaiian Tropic thing, and I think that we would be similarly on the same page, although depending on the brand and depending on the story that we're telling with native, we really want to integrate it into seamlessly into the creative, right? So I always use the example of a car brand. We would absolutely have a car come in and we'd have our host driving around in that car. For native, we would show beauty shots of the car. Would we stop and say, wow, I really love this GPS on the all new da-da-da-da-da. That's crossing.
Okay.
It's crossing a line.
I misread the cues.
It's crossing a line for us on the native side, right?
Yeah.
Because now we're going into now our host is promoting something. We're in a completely different deal structure with talent. We're asking our talent to now, be a brand spokesperson for this brand. Versus in the latter, we're saying, come be a part of this story that we want to tell on one of our publications that's authentic to our voice, that's authentic to you, talent, that's authentic to our audience, and have the brand go along for the ride.
And does that change how you approach the brand? Like in the former versus the latter, does that change what you're willing to do for them and how
so it
involved
really
they
all
can be?
comes down to distribution, right? So when we're talking about what the brands, our content strategists, when they're working, and I work one removed from sales, right? So I'm in the trenches in the creative process trying to figure out how we can take what the sales team wants to deliver for the brand client and marry that with what is happening on our publication. So that's kind of where we sit. But when they come to me and they say, X brand really wants to, have a native experience on the Huffington Post, they really want the engagement, right? They want to reach those millions and millions of people that are having a conversation today on the Huffington Post. How can we build some great content that's going to be leveraging that organic audience? That's when I come in and say, I think a native program is really going to be important for you to do that. And that's something where I can have the HuffPost main editorial, post that to Facebook, and we can have that authentic conversation with your brand. Now, if they want something where we really want to focus more heavily on, the car and all the doodads that it does, that's not going to be something that's authentic to our publication, and it's going to offend our audience. And we don't want to do that. It's too important to us. And our audience lets us know, in no uncertain terms, when we offend them. And so we really want to fight that balance. And I will kind of transition to what we were talking about with age, because in my experience, younger people, even before millennials, they don't they don't care about selling out, right? They're much more interested in the creator and the person that is bringing them the content. My generation, my parents' generation, they're a little bit more hesitant, right? Like they don't want, they see a brand and they're like, what did you do, right? Like this is now, I'm turning it off. Like, so it's really, I think, knowing your audience and knowing the levels of integration that your audience are going to be comfortable with so that you don't freak them out and have them go somewhere else.
Max, does age matter? Does it for your audience?
We sit in we sit in a unique spot. So, we're a big distribution footprint and we're programming for Gen Z. But, naturally we reach, we stretch up to those that are aspiring and down to those that are aspiring, right? I think you have a psychographic change between the younger millennials who are, in their very early 20s to the older Gen Z who are going to be graduating college in a year or so. And so marketers clearly like that 18 to 24-year-old demographic, or it stretches even beyond that. And you've got two types of temperaments within that. And so our strategy has been to program a lot of content aimed at hitting both of those interests. When it comes to branded entertainment, I think, again, the rule of thumb, you have to give somebody value. Like their engagement or their dwell time or the watch through is actually the reward for us producing something that's of value. And if that has a brand in it or doesn't have a brand in it, that sort of formula still needs to transpire because it's very easy to swipe, click, get distracted. And so in order to ascertain that engagement, and I think a key metric on that is like watch through time, right? Because there's a lot of people, if you look at your own social feeds, that, you don't like and comment on everything that you observe. And the things that you do observe actually garnered you to pause. We have a lot of mobile viewers on everything naturally. But when you pause as an individual on the things that capture your attention, there's a value. You're either having that with your friend, your mom, a publisher. It doesn't really matter. It's platform agnostic. And so those brands that can either, come forward and say, hey, we are enabling this content, and now we're going to let you get in that experience and get that value, and or we're going to be into this content, but the value of the content is going to be so great that we're not going to disrupt it with a informational message. I think to bring it to the demographic point, the younger you go to the college, high school set, the 17 or 18-year-old does not want to be disrupted. They, you look at some of the ad duration formats, like we went from 30-second spots in television to 30-second spots on the internet to 15 seconds to now there are publishers experimenting with shorter forms because the art of getting in front of your audience is one thing, but you don't want to disrupt them. And so I think, once you hit to the Gen Z, you cannot be interruptive all the time. You really have to add value if you're going to be a brand and you want to transcend them to actually encourage sharing, encourage engagement, or watch through the whole.
So better not to do ad breaks and make them part of the experience.
Make them part of the experience, or ensure you're being upfront. So,
And do you tell brands that up front? Do they have to pick? You got to pick a direction. You either have to tell people, hey, we're going to bring this to you and we're going to let it go, or we're going to be part of this whole story as you're watching it. Do they have to pick a direction?
No, they don't have
get
to
into it.
There's a lot of strategy that goes into, defining what you're actually going to make and how we're going to engage them. It's not, we don't have a shelf with product A, B, and C on it. We've got, product type A, B, and C, but what we do for a CPG company versus a travel company or food and beverage, they're all going to have different goals. And whether you need performance marketers differ from brand marketers. You've got retailers that are really heavy on seasonality that need to drive footfall. We've partnered with a couple of them where we actually have Awesomeness product in the stores, with our own brand. And so, in some of these experiences, we're vested in the marketing, right? The better we can market, we actually have vested interest in footfall. And so it is not a one-size-fits-all. I think creating great content has always lived under that, right? again, taking it back to television, not every pilot that gets made gets put on the air. And so,
Wait, what?
and so,
It does now.
we have a research arm called Wildness where, we'll sit down and do research on, what's required, what's needed, depending on how much time we have in front of a campaign. And then when we need to be more nimble or reactive and quick, then, we can, use influencer marketing, which is obviously a big buzzword in the market right now, but we've been doing it long before it was like, a mass market appeal in the new fronts. And so, each of those tactics is going to matter. And then you look at the different platforms that you're going to distribute that content on. YouTube in the social video world is now almost considered long form.
Yeah.
And I make it akin to making something that is it going to be for the moment? Is it going to be evergreen? But it's like putting a book on a library shelf. It's going to live there for a long time. So it's edited and crafted and it looks good and it's packaged because somebody later is going to be able to come and find that. Whereas if you're doing something for Snapchat, right, it's more like skywriting, right? It has to be artsy, it has to be designed because you're going to hit a lot of people in a short amount of time, but just like the wind blows in a day, it's gone. And so the investment in time, the strategy, and what you're driving or asking of people is going to differ on how you use those different platforms, which totally informs what you're going to make.
What you're going to create. I mean, Ryan, I think maybe an interesting example of what Max is talking about is your Logan Paul stuff with Dunkin' Donuts that you guys showed at your new front yesterday that I thought was really interesting because he seemed totally legitimately jazzed about hanging out in the donut shop. Like the guy was completely into it, and it seemed like, I remember thinking to myself, I don't know what I'm watching. I don't know if I'm watching an ad. I don't know if I'm watching, like, this is what his content is, because it's kind of no different than him walking around in his regular YouTube videos going like, hey, this is what I'm doing today. But the fans loved it. They're like, hey, we saw you on a rewards card, and we saw you on this, and they're downloading the app. So, like, what was it? What were we watching? Was that content? Was it, talk about how they were kind of, how he's behind it?
Can it be both?
Yeah.
I mean, it was the brand allowing Logan to be himself and asking Logan, how do we play in your world? And how do, along the way, do we keep a couple of goals in mind? And giving him a wide breadth to say, you can take whichever lane on this road you want as long as we end up at a specific end goal.
Even if that lane is like really big,
very windy road at times,
yeah.
But his audience finds it really fun. Another unique project with Logan that was of similar flair, we did a Black Friday project with Aeropostale last year, where we know that Logan wants to be an action star at some point down the road. He is a big physical specimen already, and he wants to be out there doing physical comedy and or action-oriented things. And we knew that Aeropostale had some specific goals around Black Friday, partnering them up and saying, hey, Aero, he wants to do these action-oriented things. Can we figure out how to send him in a unique way to as many of your stores on Black Friday as possible? We put him in a helicopter and a police car and a Bentley and a hoverboard and all kinds of different things on a tour across the Southwest. And on the phone call with the brand before we launched this project, you have Logan Paul saying, hey guys, just thanks again, but this is a Logan Paul project. I am really excited about it, and I know my audience is going to be really excited about it. And in those cases, when you give them the freedom to do something unique and fun for their audience, he over-delivered in bucket loads. He was only obligated to do so much activity, and he literally hit 5x more in terms of the content he pushed out. And his audience consumed more and more throughout that day on Black Friday because you could see how authentically excited he was about it. Was it branded? Did we have an Aeropostale logo hidden and placed in different spots around? Absolutely. It wasn't even hidden. It was present, and you had the fans saying, thank you, Aero, for making this happen.
We'll get into the definition of bucket loads in the metrics section in a moment. But one thing that I did want to ask, just as a quick follow-up while we're talking about talent, is you talked about Logan being a good match for the brand, and it's something that we talked about before, which is doing a really interesting job of matching people up and making sure that the talent is going to want to do it, and that the brand is going to have realistic expectations of what's going to happen, and you do a lot of that stuff up front, right? A lot of that planning happens up front.
Absolutely. We are a deliberately smaller network. We only have about 1,200, it's still a large number, but only about 1,200 creators that we work with. And the goal there is to sit really close to those guys and know what gets them to move, know what doesn't get them to move or pushes the wrong buttons. And when a brand comes in and says, I've got my eyes on this guy, I really want to work with them, I know what kind of works and doesn't work for him. And even on paper, these guys might be a great fit with your brand. I know whether it's approval processes, content turnarounds, legal, something else involved, this is going to be a unsuccessful relationship. And so right off of the bat, and sometimes having that hard conversation to say, this guy might not be a fit. I know on paper or because of a demographic he is, but we're all going to have a pretty tough road to walk down. And then you look at what are some of the other options for us instead of having a much tougher conversation midstream because of a legal or approval or timeline or whatever else. It's a challenging business to work through. A lot of our partners are not trained, experienced business people. And that's part of the role we play is to help them navigate, help them understand why delivering for a brand in a specific time frame or fashion is important. And if we do our job well, hopefully each one of our creators is getting a little bit smarter and becoming a little bit more of a marketer along the way.
And Drea, you guys work with a huge range of talent, like
We work
from
with
influencers
everybody.
to big people, major
We
editorial.
work with these guys, we
Yeah.
work with that. But I was just like waiting for somebody else to say that it was hard because
Yeah.
you were making it sound so easy for so long. And, we have some really great partners that let us, give us the free range that you're talking about. But I find that we are in a really unique position because we sit between all of these different partners, right? We're trying to please so many masters, right?
Yeah.
The brand is really who we work for the brand, but we also work for editorial. So we kind of sit right in between. And our goal is at the end of the day to have everyone be happy, but they have very different goals of what makes them feel good. And so I'm curious to hear more about you gentlemen and how that works on, setting expectations with the brands and talking about you both mentioned turning it over to the creator, and these creators are 19-year-olds, kids
Taking Fortune 1000 companies and
are
handing
really
them
good.
over,
And you have
yeah.
this brand that's got a lot of money on the
Right.
line. How are you convincing them? I know I'm turning into the moderator, Dan. I'm
Good,
sorry.
I'm
just
done.
I have
Believe
so
me.
many
You
questions.
better.
Well-
And Max, is it? It's not hard for you personally, obviously, but your team maybe they struggle.
No, it's look. Well, first, within our house, it's a mix of representing creators who may be 19. We also represent millennial moms, right? So we have a gamut, but we also are a studio, and we also make a lot of content. So there's a lot of professionals on our team to make. I think it's 800 hours of content a year, right, across everything. Being in this market, specifically in branded content, social video, since it's sort of its launch of mainstream back in 2012, which really started becoming to the forefront, we have seen a big shift in marketers who went from I don't know anything to looking at social video publishers, creators, whatever, as just distribution. Okay, we've crafted an idea, now we want you to execute it. I would say the past couple years it was a lot of back and forth with them on, that's going to come off inauthentic. That's going to come off, too in their face, right? If it's an influencer campaign, these creators are not going to maybe align to that exact verbiage. And so we would consult them into saying, hey, give us bullets of what you want executed, and then let our company or let the creators riff on that and come back to you with something that's going to embody all the messaging, any call to action, or whatever the requirements might be, but do it in a way that is going to be receptive to, for all intents and purposes, even though they're scaled now, these niche audiences, which was different, not that long ago, where you'd actually have to devise creative and get it ready for the mass market. You're actually now having to take that same idea and maybe package it a variety of different ways to reach the same scale of audience. And now, I would say over the last year where it's actually really getting hard is they took that message and now everything for the most part, comes with they have a strategic vision, they have a deadline, they have a budget, go. And so it's really become the norm now. And so there are a lot of prolific creators or influencers that have big reach, but they may have been famous for being themselves, not for being the latest creative director. Whereas you've got some creators who actually tell stories or come up with their own series, and they're very comfortable in doing that ideation. At our company, when we become the creator or we're the publisher, it's about having to be selective of the programs or the campaigns that we believe we can either, one, come up with a great idea, and two, distribute it and actually be proud of it. Because we're not just pipes. We have a lot of reach, we have a lot of distribution, but it comes with that awesomeness fingerprint on it that that's going to be relevant, that's going to be cool, that's going to fit the brand. We can't afford to sell out because we ourselves are doing brand marketing for our own products and our own existence all the time. And so it's super hard. It can be super rewarding and fun, and when you get it right, the results are incredible, and you continue to see that content pace and grow, and a year later you can look back, and it's still driving value to that marketer. But no one ever said it was easy.
Yeah, no, I mean, where we sit is we're really trying to work and be the more of that creative, I don't want to use the word agency because we're not an agency, right? We're a shop, but we're a group of professionals, editorial, mixed with people that understand marketing objectives, that understand talent and have deep talent relationships. So we're able.
And that's set up as a separate group within the organization?
It's set up as a separate group, but we all have alliances to the different brands, and we sit next to editorial, and editorial trusts us because we built that trust within the organization. And a lot of times, I was talking to a marketer out in the West Coast this week, and they were like, we worked with a big publisher, and they had a shop, and it was just crappy, right? Like it was not as good as their editorial. And we have kind of the opposite thing where we actually have some budgets that we can work with, and we're really beholden to our brand partners to make sure that the content that we're making is even better at times than what our editorial's making, because we really want to show that this is a premium product and a premium offering that you're getting. But back to that unique balance of like, okay, so we're sitting here in the middle, we're pulling all these points together so that we're able to offer that client service to the brand to really allow them to, we're used to these rounds of reviews, we're used to being able to have this feedback. Like, we typically don't say yes to wardrobe approval, but if that's what you really need to make yourself feel better, we know what that means, and we can hold your hand through this process a little bit, which it sounds like all of us are doing in some extent to it.
I think the key word you said is trust.
Yeah.
We are smaller, so we can build that trust with our creators. We go way out of our way to make sure that we can build that trust with the brands that we partner with, to make sure that they realize, there's a good reason why we're empowering that creator. And when it comes back to the creator, helping them, they trust that, they're an asset of ours. And if we allow them to become over-branded or do something that their audience isn't going to like, but we can coach them through it, then that asset is less valuable for us as a whole. So it's on us to be able to say to brands at times, no, that's not going to work, or that's going to be a bad move for everybody involved. And it's on us to work with a creator after they've taken that kind of bullet points or Kinder brief or whatever it is, and help them figure out, we need to find a authentic way to tweak this a couple of degrees left or right so that we keep those brand goals in mind, or we maintain a brand safety, or we stay on goal without, over-branding you or without pushing your audience away.
And do you think, or I guess I know that it does matter, but how do you think the talent relationship matters in that conversation? So I'll give you an example. A lot of our stuff tends to be more traditional talent. So our stuff is LeBron and Jennifer Lopez, Tiesto, Kobe. These are people who, in and of themselves, have major social media networks. They're influencers in and of themselves, even though they're not YouTube stars. They're traditional talent. We've also worked with a lot of YouTube influencers on programming and seen both sides of it. So are you seeing the talent relationships as something that's evolving? Great example, yesterday you guys announced a big project with The Rock. I mean, that's such an interesting mix. Clearly a major social influencer, even though he certainly wasn't born through YouTube. So are you guys seeing that mix, or that being a turning point or a bigger conversation now as you're working with brands and how they're engaging with that talent stuff? Maybe you can talk for a second about how that mix happened. I mean, with The Rock now being part of it.
I think regardless of what helped you build that audience or help build the relationship with them, it's core to that relationship. The Rock, although he is the biggest movie star in the world, both physically and in box office, he speaks to his audience every day and replies back to probably nearly 50% or more of the social call-outs he gets from his audience. He has a two-way relationship with them, and that's what makes him a really unique person for us to be able to partner with. The same with Shay Mitchell, who was born out of a more traditional environment. She is constantly interacting with her fans on Instagram and Snapchat. She is hilarious on Snapchat and replies back to her fans quite often. And you get to see this real person that makes her that much more appealing. And from a brand perspective, makes her an influencer. That audience looks at her as more of a peer. And taking advice or having a brand put in front of you by a peer versus by somebody who's an authority but might not necessarily be on the same relationship level. That has significantly more impact. So regardless of where you're born out of, I think it's about being able to maintain a great relationship with your audience and in turn get them to move or dip or do something.
Max, same thing?
I mean, look, we are making movies, and so we're mixing call it the social celebrity, if you will, with the more traditional celebrity. I think those lines are blurring a little bit more quickly than a lot of people outside of this sort of business understand. But you just look at the surveys that are coming out, and who would carry a higher Q score today, or all that, right? So our relationship with talent. I came to the company through an acquisition of a company we started called Big Frame, which was a talent management shop for the initial talent that was born from the internet, and so we dovetailed into Awesomeness a couple of years ago because the company believed having a relationship closer to the talent to make these really robust products, not just integrations and not just YouTube content, which we've executed on. So our talent business internally and how we manage it and operate it is paramount. Paula Kaplan oversees a talent group, comes from big media. We've got a network team that are hand-holding a lot of the creators, as well as a talent relationship team that is hand-holding the talent that we have in our series, in our YouTube series, and our SVOD series, and our movies. And then we've got a talent management organization with the company that are representing these artists full 360. And announcing deals like Tyler Oakley's relationship with Ellen recently. So, we're invested in talent beyond just the purposes of our company, because inevitably good goes around, and it's symbiotic.
I have a different question for you, but before I get to it, we have about 10 minutes left. So if there's questions as you have them, just raise your hand while we're talking. I want to get to one other topic, and then I'll start answering, but just raise them so I know who's out there, and we'll get them. Okay, cool. I'll get to them in just 1 minute. Okay, so along these lines, when you have creators, and again, Drea, because you guys have such a broad spectrum of stuff, we've spent a lot of time talking about integrations and sponsorships, but what about brands as content creators? And you touched on it a little bit, Max. Brands as curators who are actually the content themselves. Maybe Royal Crush is a good example. I'd love you to talk about the Smashbox stuff that you guys presented yesterday. I think is a great example. Drea, what are you guys doing? Do you let brands be creators on your platform?
Yes.
The end game?
Yes and no. We actually are creators for brands. So we have a lot of brands that we work with where we're their content shop. So they come to us because we make content all day long to tell us what to make and to make it for them. So we give them the content, we white label the content, and then they take it out and put it on their networks, and then they use our distribution networks as well. But again, the relationship, we're not in the business right now of having a brand come to us and say, we made this thing, can you just put it on your site as your thing? That's just not the business that we're in. We think, again, this goes back to that native versus branded conversation and really respecting our audience in that way. That's not to say that we don't have a million other distribution levers
Options
and
within-
options
right, but it just
within our
works
network that
differently.
we can leverage for you, brand. And please, like, let's work together to create some custom content that is going to be endemic to
Yeah.
our platform.
And I mean, on the Smashbox side, they came to you and said, we want to create our own channel. How did that work?
The Smashbox conversation started with an existing relationship with the Lauder brands. We had built a channel for Bobbi Brown makeup on YouTube and leveraged a bunch of influencers to produce content. Basically said, Lily Singh, if we gave you a sandbox to play in where you could be a little bit more girly and not alienate your male audience on your main channel, what would it be? What would you want to do? And she created a really fun series called The Tube's Hottest. And that she's alone, probably responsible for over 200,000 subscribers to Bobbi Brown's channel. So Smashbox came along and wanted to recreate that idea, but they're the farthest from the creator in that scenario. The brand is wholly the enabler, and the creator is just getting value out of it. They get a great studio to use. They get all kinds of assets, from wardrobe to makeup to editors to producers, green screens, all kinds of great space to level up what they're doing. So going back to what we started this with, the brand has come in and said, help us make something better for you, or help us make what you do better along the way. Tell us how to do it. Tell us what you need, and we'll try and bring it in. And the creators came in droves. The only quid pro quo for them is use a little bit of either a hashtag or a handle or metadata on YouTube. And now if you search Smashbox on YouTube, you will see that some of the biggest beauty and fashion creators on the platform all show up in the results with their own organic videos that are not heavily branded in any way, but they all say made at Smashbox. So in some ways, they kind of SEO'd the platform in that way. But the real win on that one was Instagram. Somewhat of a side goal when we started the campaign, we were able to recognize the fact that some of the best content or easiest and high volume content coming out of there was the photography type material or the short form video for Instagram. And being able to churn out much better content where those girls could stop by and have a much bigger lighting rig to use to show off every last pore they were using involved. We helped them gain over 1 million new subscribers on their Instagram account.
Max, same thing. Will you let brands create on your platform? Be the creator?
We have to have the editorial voice because we lived there before and after the campaign. I think, cosmetics, CPG have done a really good job over the last couple years leveraging YouTube, particularly. There was a trend for a while to do how-to videos, and a lot of the beauty girls, the beauty gurus, as they're called on YouTube. There was a whole life cycle in 2014 into 2015 on making how-tos, how to do your hair, how to put on lipstick, eyeshadow, etc. And then there's a population of those videos that you can now go into YouTube and search just about anything and get a video of how to do it, from installing a light and electricity, which I recently learned, to, I had to change a light at the house, to, how to do the latest braids. And so a campaign that we were involved with where the brand actually was part of the producer was this program with Unilever called All Things Hair. And Unilever had grouped a lot of the brands under its hair care categories to collaborate, and they created this encyclopedia of hairstyles on YouTube that featured prominent creators, featuring the various products to do that with, of course, a variety of hair care products under the portfolio of Unilever, and made a big splash in different versions of it internationally, so that when you were searching to get the latest, braid or the latest bob or the bun or the different things, that you were going to actually get this value of learning how to do it, somebody that was doing it that you trust, and hey, it just happened to come from the Unilever handle as opposed to, insert, a publisher or a creator's handle. And I think that was really smart of them to take advantage of a trend. I'd say another great example is GoPro, right? Everyone's obsessed with their GoPros if they have them, and anticipating these 360 cameras, et cetera. And that's like a whole network of product that the brand is helping to foster everyone to upload their own content that have all these loyalists. And so therefore, even though individuals are making that content, I would almost consider them a brand publisher because it sort of has a certain temperament of amount. And it's typically action sports and snowboarding and surfing or whatever it is. But you know what you're going to get.
But it's still content.
It's still content that they're curating and creating, and it's watermarked or headlined or edited, et cetera. When it comes to working with us, I think we're of course not going to be a brand's entire solution. So when they're looking at making a video campaign or a social media campaign holistically, that we're a component in a strategy, and therefore 99 out of 100 times they're asking us to help make something for them as opposed to them give us something to distribute. But we don't distribute third-party produced content just because we have so much to distribute.
Not your gig.
Yeah, it's not our gig.
Yeah. Question in the front.
Yeah, so I have a bias towards numbers because I work in analytics. So just wondering what and I imagine that depending upon what their objectives are for the campaign, that the things that you report on might be different. But what are some of the things that you guys report on for branded content, and how are you tracking it across maybe the different points of distribution? And what are they judging you on when they have to renew the budget the next time or something like that?
I literally just had this meeting
Let me just
before
repeat
coming
the
over
question
here.
real quick for the cameras. Is the question's around metrics and metrics of success for branded content, and how do you measure it, especially if you're going to ask for renewals and get people to go on? How do you measure the content? How do you measure the distribution?
Well, we should talk if you have a solution, but I think that right now we're doing a lot, but a lot of it is looking at just the numbers on all of our different campaigns and really trying to, again, look at the content and see where the similarities are, and how the content is influencing the numbers, right? So, I've been talking to our analytics team, internal team, about do the robots read actual pictures yet? Can they know this is visual and this has a lot of quick cuts and it has this talent in it without me tagging it, right? So right now, as a human being, I'm looking at the data and analyzing it for our brand partners and then reporting back to them.
And are you reporting back on media, time spent, what they're watching?
Time spent, we're reporting what topics are doing well. So we're looking at, the different, the editorial insights. We're looking at the headlines. We're looking at the amount of video views. We're looking at comments. We're looking at shares. Shares is huge for us on the Huffington Post. I just did a native campaign where we got 2,000 hearts on Facebook, which was,
brand new metric.
Brand new metric. And, we had 100% positive comments.
Wow.
So, that is crazy banana time, right? Nobody, especially, I don't know if you guys have ever looked at any comments on the Huffington Post, 100% positive comments on but that was my lovely audience development lead going through every single comment and checking to see.
So for the short term, it's a little bit of media metrics that are kind of automated and a little bit of manual labor.
Yeah, and then we also have an amazing, research team. We have a ton of resources, which is fantastic. And they're going in and looking at brand sentiment. They're looking at the days that our shows launched. Was there an uptick in that hashtag that was being used? And they're really doing a deeper dive into looking at the brand and how the brand is getting value from this, a larger value than just our metrics can offer.
There was a question in the back. Right here. That's you? Yeah.
Great. Quick case study for the three of you. And I know there's not much time, but just with your creative hats on. You get a call from CAA. The CAA says, you got to meet this amazing female personality. She's mind-blowing, she's outrageous, she's funny, she's fearless, she's crazy. All she does is do-gooder stuff. It's all she does. It's all do-gooder, do-gooder, do-gooder. We can't sell do-gooder. Nobody can sell do-gooder. She met with Pepsi. Pepsi says, no do-gooder stuff, it doesn't sell. Okay? It's your job to figure out how to take this outrageous personality and turn her into a huge influencer. Right? And you agree. She's an amazing personality. but all she does is do-gooder stuff all over the world. Are you with me? Can you put your creative hat on? You want to work with her? You want to turn her into an influencer? We believe brands will get behind her. She's already got Pepsi interested, but Pepsi doesn't want to do do-gooder stuff either.
So the question is, if you find a talent who is a personality that does, in your words, do-gooder, or stuff that may or may not be apparent or interesting right away, or how you can leverage that right away may not be readily apparent, but you know instinctively that there's some opportunity around a particular talent. You guys have talked about growing influencers, and they've been native and organic to your platforms. And maybe, Max, maybe you can talk about this. Like, how do you grow those relationships, or are you starting with people who are already proven entities?
Well, I would say the roles would probably reverse. We probably would have discovered the do-gooder person on YouTube first, since like they have to be built. That's typically how it's worked as the digital creator market has evolved. Companies like ours, and there's, yours as well, Studio 71, and there's other companies where, early on they were mining the data to, uncover who they thought would have a talent or a knack or a voice or something. I think, to make someone an influencer, the first thing you want to do is not change what they're standing for, right? Because you want them to wake up every day and do that and continue that. There's a lid for every pot out there. Ultimately, the Pepsis of the world, or brands, of that caliber, they have their briefs, they have their strategies, but there's brands that maybe aren't that established that would want to align with somebody who's doing good in the world, right? I mean, that's a little bit broad, so I can't narrow it down beyond that, but I think the first thing we would probably do is like, who's watching, do an audience development assessment as to like what type of content is performing. Is there a cadence to your scheduling and uploading? Is there, things that get your audience to comment on more than others? Is there any continuity among that? Are there people out there like you that you could collaborate with to grow that audience more quickly than just the regular pacing? Maybe featuring that do-gooder in content that we're making where we already have large reach, and introduce them to new audiences. And then the brand team would probably start pitching this do-gooder to, we deal with a lot of campaigns. So, this is a hard analogy to work with, but, I would say that, there's lots of, cosmetics companies that are all about organic and good for the world. There are food companies that are organic and do good for the world.
But it sounds like the key from the talent side is staying true to what you're doing and building audience, and it's what the theme has been the whole time,
but
right?
They need to build their own audience, though, right?
It's you can't just the word influencer is used incorrectly because you earn that influence.
Yeah.
Right? It's not like you're an influencer
Why
now
don't you
because
just
you're
win the
right.
lottery while you're at
Right?
it?
Like it's not something you can just go and say, oh, I'm going to go and do that. You actually have to earn it. And you don't want to game the viewership or game the audience, because then you're not going to have that niche following. That niche could be 3-5 million people, but comparatively to what the world is, that's niche. And so you want to make certain that the people that are coming to watch you are coming for what you're serving, and that their demographics, their geolocations, and all the things that will make up brands wanting to work with you are aligned and symmetrical to what you stand for. Because the second someone who's a do-gooder collaborates with someone who isn't, you've thus in fact contaminated the audience from the rationale why brands would want to partner with that influence in the first place, right? Like they want that to be through and through, from the content, the voice, but equally as important, the audience that follows them, that makes them that quote influencer.
That's a great point.
Everything that he said, usually, it's us finding people, and then they get bigger, and CAA or WME or somebody else gets involved once they're of that scale. But if it's somebody who's a do-gooder, and we haven't been able to land on a brand that wants to get involved and involved in the right way, then find a charity. Find a project that she can get involved in and prove it. If you do a project with a charity and you develop a case study of your own on how did this work, look at the way that she activated an A, B, and C, and each one did unique things, then now you have something to take back to Pepsi and say, here's why you actually need to do that.
Have her blog on the Huffington Post. I mean, we're all about what's working. Brands come to us to do good in the world and to highlight the good that they're doing in the world. And, you know, that's our number one thing. So.
I'm going to leave that as the last word, but thank you guys for doing it. I've been told to let everybody know that the exhibit hall is open. There's like a half-hour break. It's going to be the last time that it's open. Thanks, everybody. Thanks to our panelists for doing it.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
you guys being here.